All right, with that, here's our speakers on steps 1, 2, and 3. Going first, Lisa G.
Hi, my name's Lisa. I'm an addict. I always get nervous when I talk. It's never going to end, I don't think. So typically I might talk like really fast at the beginning, but I will settle down. So if I'm talking too fast and you feels like I'm speaking another language, just wave or something to let me know to slow down. I'm thinking I'm going to... when they asked me to talk on steps 1, 2, and 3, it's like I've been clean a while, and it's like it's not as big a thing in my life anymore as it was early on, but they're still absolutely positively apply in my life. But they talk about 1, 2, and 3 being our foundation steps, and they really truly are, because I can't go on with my recovery. I can't work the other steps unless I've got that good, strong foundation and really know without a doubt that I'm an addict. I didn't know that when I came here. I came here to get a paper signed. I always said when I was growing up that I would never be like my mom, and I turned out just like my mom, and I just did not want to admit that, and I really truly knew in the back of my head that I could control my using. I knew it, and despite the fact that I had tried it over and over again and wasn't able to, I knew that there was some secret out there, and I just hadn't figured it out yet, and I just needed to keep working at it, because I always believed I could do anything. I could do anything I set my mind to, so I was going to figure out the secret to using successfully. And I had to go to meetings for a year and a half getting my paper signed, and by the time I was done with that year and a half, that's how long it took me to admit, to get past that denial that, I'm an addict. I belong here. I am powerless over my addiction. I cannot stop. I cannot control it. I was listening to the speaker earlier in the ballroom, and it was the same things he was saying. It's like, for me, using wasn't about trying to feel better. It's just about trying to feel different, because I just did not like who I was. I felt like I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to interact. I didn't know how to feel feelings. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And when I was high, I felt different, and that was good enough. And so then when you come to a program like this and they say you got to stop using, it's like, but what do you do? What do you do if you stop using when that's like everything? So that denial, the denial of that and the denial that I didn't want to be like my mom just made it a real struggle for me. But I did figure it out in a year and a half, and I know it takes some people longer than that, so, I did all right with that. So I finally admitted that I am powerless over my addiction. I cannot control my using. Regardless of what I put in my body, once I start, I cannot stop. And I can fight that all I want, but I couldn't figure out the secret to using, and after a year and a half of trying, it's like, I finally surrendered, and I'd hear people talk in the meetings all the time about it's about surrender. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means you're giving up the fight. You're going over to the winning side. And it's like, yeah, that's bullshit, We pick and choose those cliches that we like, that work for us and the ones that don't work for us. And but what I found in my time here is that most of those cliches, they turned out to be true. People don't just say them because they sound good. They say them because they're true. So, after that big struggle of fighting and fighting and fighting, I just got tired of fighting. I got tired of fighting, and I thought, what is it going to hurt to just try this? What is it going to hurt? Back when I got clean, you always used to say, just go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Just don't use for 90 days, and if you're not happy, we'll refund your misery free of charge. It's all out there, because back in that day was the 90 days same as cash deals they were always talking on TV. So we got 90 days. You're not happy? All my misery's out there waiting for me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm glad I did. Best decision of my life, Today, the powerlessness is more about those other things that come up in life, wanting people to behave the way I think they should, or wanting things to be the way I like things to be. And, it's kind of funny because everything is based on my perspective, obviously. And I used to be like really, really anal about time. If I tell you I'm going to come to your house at 9 o'clock and pick you up, you need to be ready at 9 o'clock. Don't make me wait a minute. But now I've got to the point though where I can give you 5 minutes. So I'll give you 5 minutes before I start getting mad. So now because I changed my perspective, someone else that used to think like me that doesn't want to give you a minute, I'm thinking, what's your problem? because my perspective changed, I think everyone else's perspective needs to change, So that's the way it goes. And that's what I need to remind myself sometimes when I'm like wanting my way and wanting people to think like I do and act like I do. I got to remind myself that we're all in our different spaces. And where I was yesterday is not where I am today. And where you are today is not where you're going to be tomorrow. And you're on your journey and I'm on my journey. So I need to let you do things at your pace, just like I want you to let me do things at my pace. So when I think about the powerlessness, that's what I think about. And the other day when I was driving behind somebody, it was down a back road, but the speed limit was 55. And they were doing 55. And I couldn't pass them. I'm thinking, damn it, what is wrong with you? People do 65 on this road, not 55. And I'm going to get all upset and bent out of shape. And then I remind myself, Lisa, what? You're going to get home a minute earlier. If you can pass this lady and do 65, you're going to get home a whole minute earlier. How is that going to change your life? It's not. But me sitting there getting pissed off and thinking, what are you doing driving the speed limit? I'm going to feel frustrated and angry. They're not, because I have got to the point today where I'm not tailgating. I wasn't like riding on her ass or honking. I wasn't gesturing. I was like keeping a safe distance, because I tell myself stuff like, this could be like an old person that doesn't drive very safe. My mom was like not the best driver, so that's why I tell myself, she might be someone that's like your mom. So just treat her with respect. So, I've learned these lessons. I've learned to deal with powerlessness, but I still tend to, I want things my way sometimes. And so I just need to remind myself, Lisa, you're powerless. And most things are not a big deal. That's the other thing I need to remember. Most things are not a big deal. If I don't get my way, that's okay. Life is going to go on and everything's going to be fine. If someone doesn't do things just like I want them to do, that's okay. And if I don't do things just like someone else wants me to do, that's going to be okay too. So, I've got a whole lot better with that whole powerlessness stuff. And as far as like powerless and our lives are unmanageable, I never got to the point where I thought my life was unmanageable. And I was thinking about that. It's like, why? It's not like it was a happy, healthy life, but I think it's just how we define things. I just have always had this belief that whatever life throws at me, I'm going to deal with it. And whether I deal with it in a good way or bad way, I didn't think my life was unmanageable, because I was young when I got here and working in a fast food restaurant. So I get fired from McDonald's. I'll go to Wendy's and get a job. That's not unmanageable. I get fired from Wendy's, I'll go to Pizza Hut. That's not unmanageable. So I think it's just in how you define it. But for me, it was just being able to admit that powerlessness. Until I admit that, nothing else matters. Until I know without a doubt that I am powerless, that I cannot use anything successfully, then the rest of the stuff's not going to work. And I was one of those people too that I thought, I really don't like the high from this particular drug very much, so maybe I'll just use that one. And it was, again, about feeling different. It wasn't about feeling better, it was just about feeling different. But it always led me back to my drug of choice. I had a drug of choice, and anything else was not good enough. And it just made me want that drug of choice. So, I just had to admit that, I can't use. I'm powerless. So, like I said, it took me a while to learn that. And, we have the step writing guide now, which I love. I love the step writing guides, but we didn't have that when I came around. And I think we took our time a little bit more. Nowadays, there's a lot of people that think you just got to get through that guide as quick as you can. And they think just because I wrote on step 1, 2, and 3 that I've worked them. No. No, there's way more to work in those steps than writing them. And especially with those first 3, there's no rush. I don't tend to sponsor a lot of newer people. Most of the people that ask me are people that have had clean time. And but when I do have sponsored newer people, it's like I don't want them to rush through the step writing guide, because you really got to know. You got to have that good firm foundation. You got to know that you're powerless before you move on to step 2. And just writing it doesn't mean that you've worked it. So that's my one and only complaint with the step writing guide. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I grew up where we went to church every Sunday, and from early on, I was always questioning, but this doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. How can this be? And I just told you, just got to have faith. Just got to have faith. You're not supposed to question this stuff. You just need to have faith. So I quit questioning out loud. But I was still in my head always questioning. And then, I start using, and things get different. And by the time I got here and they're talking the higher power stuff, my concept of a higher power when I got here was more like Santa Claus. and he had his nice list and his naughty list, and I was on the naughty list, so this is a higher power that was not going to do anything for me. So when people are telling me to pray, I'm thinking that doesn't make sense. I'm praying to something that I think I'm on the naughty list and who's not going to do anything for me. So that was really rough. And then people tell you just fake it till you make it. Just pretend you believe, and it's kind of like, well, that's what I was told when I was a kid, just have faith and just do it. So I tried it. I try, and my concept of a higher power at the beginning was more like the acronym of good orderly direction. It's like, okay, I can get that. Do the right thing for the right reason. The program, things like that. Something that was a little bit more tangible to me than some type of supreme being that I never had a strong belief in to begin with. The beauty of this program is you don't need to understand your higher power to use it, and your higher power does not have to look like anyone else's. My higher power does not have to be the higher power that I was raised with in the church I went to. It doesn't have to be, someone else's version that they say, hey, this is how you need to believe. My higher power is my higher power, and I can do what works for me. And it says in our book, we don't need to understand it to use it. Yay, because I still don't understand it, and it's changed a lot since I've been here. I tried really, really, really hard to believe in that Christian God that I was raised with, because I could see people that had good, strong faith, and I could see that that was a strength for them and that they really got something out of that. And I tried, and you know what? It finally just got to the point where I just had to say, this does not work for me. It doesn't. And a little bit of guilt, but, I got to be honest with myself. I think there's something out there. I don't know what. All I need to do to know that there is something bigger than me out there is look outside at the beauty out there, the lakes and the trees and all this stuff. Look at our beautiful bodies and our beautiful minds. Something created this, and it wasn't any of us. So I know there's something out there, just don't know what it is. And I don't even know what I call my higher power. My higher power is like so vague to me that I try and figure it out, and it's like I run in circles in my head. So I'm not even going to try and explain it to you because I just still don't understand it. What I do know is that since early on in my recovery, I've prayed, and I still pray today. I pray every morning. It kind of sets my mind straight, I think, to get my day started on a good path, And it's not about, please help me win the lottery today. Please help me whatever. I'm not praying for material things. I'm not praying for myself except for to help me just get out of the way and be a good person, to be able to apply spiritual principles in my life, not self-centered, self-serving ones. So despite not knowing what I'm praying to, I get strength from praying. So I pray every morning and I pray every night, and there's times during the day that I'm praying for patience or I'm praying for tolerance or things like that. So yeah, I don't understand it, but it works for me. Praying works for me. It just, like I said, I think it just kind of sets my mind straight. It keeps me thinking about spiritual principles and not thinking about, what is good for me in this minute. So it works. And the second part of that is the insanity part. And it's like, I am not insane. I don't know where they're talking about this whole sanity stuff. And it took me many, many, many years to recognize the insanity of my addiction. And the insanity for me was that I knew from an early age that I used too much. And I knew I should cut down. I knew I should control it. I knew, that it was not good for me. But it never, until I came to meetings, it never occurred to me to quit. But, when I was still out there using, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say, today's the day. Today's the day I'm going to control my using. Today I'm just going to have this much and then I'm going to stop, And then I'd go through my day and I'd do what I always did. I'd pick up and I'd do the same stuff I always did. And I'd wake up in the next morning and maybe at home, maybe somewhere else, maybe in my car, maybe in some stranger's bed. And I'd say, oh man, you fucked up again. But today's going to be different. Today I'm going to control my using. And the insanity is I believed it. And I told myself that over and over and over again, and I believed it. That's insanity. And it took me a long time to recognize that because I'm a mental health professional, so the word insanity, I have different definition of that. And it's like, no, I'm not that. But yes, when I'm using, my thinking is insane. It's the stuff the lies we need to tell ourselves so we can maintain that using. If I tell myself that, Lisa, you can't control it. Just admit it. Just admit you're going to go out there and just get wasted again today like you did yesterday and the day before and the day before. But no, My denial has to say, no, I think you can handle this. I think you can control it today. Just doing that same stuff over and over and over and really truly believing that today is going to be different. That's crazy. And I know that if I picked up today, I'd be right back at it. They say that if you pick up, it's like your disease has been progressing and that you're going to be at that advanced stage. And I've never had long-term clean time I picked up, so I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not going to try it. Because other people that have tried it say it's true. So I don't need to try that. I don't have that kind of insanity anymore. I can learn from other people's mistakes. And so I don't need to do that today. Then the third step, that's hard to make that decision to turn things over to something that's hard to understand, or something that, until I got to that point of thinking that there's not a naughty and a nice list, I had to get past that. I had to, they say in the book, a higher power should be loving and greater than ourselves, and I had to throw forgiving in there, because I just thought that I had all this stuff that I did that I couldn't forgive myself for, and I thought, how's a higher power going to forgive me? I can't forgive myself. The stuff I did is not forgivable. And until I could get past that and thinking I was bad and thinking I was going to get punished, then I'm not going to turn anything over to a higher power, because I just didn't believe that there was anything there for me. So I had to come to that belief that, yep, you screwed up a lot, Lisa, and get to that point of understanding that when we're out there using, we do some really crappy things. And I used to think that made me a really shitty person. And I realized today that what I do when I'm using, that's not who I am. The things we do when we use, we do it because you have to. You can't be an addict and get through life clean. It just doesn't work that way. So we just do things. That's not who we are. It's just what we have to do to live that lifestyle. And so I had to get past that point of thinking that I was a bad person, that I was unforgivable, and recognize that, yep, I did some things. I did things I'm not proud of. I violated my values. I violated the morals I was brought up with. I have guilt. I have remorse. I have shame. But I don't have to hang on for that the rest of my life. I can let that go. I can recognize it's who I was, not who I have to be, and not who I am anymore. So when I can let go of that, then I can start moving forward and trusting that, okay, maybe there is something out here that can help me out. Maybe there are some other kind of things I can turn my life over to instead of, the destruction and chaos of addiction. I can try and turn my life over to something more positive. And like I said, early on, it was like the good orderly direction. I would use that doing the right thing for the right reason would be my kind of guidepost that I would check myself by. I'm checking to make sure I started my timer. Yep. So I would use that, and that would be kind of my guide. And I struggle with this whole stuff a lot, with the higher power and the beliefs. And to me, I just think that religion, I think we just need to try and explain things are not explainable. I think that's what religion is. We're taking this world, like, how do we get here? What's it all about? And we're taking something that you cannot explain, and we're trying to put it in terms that we can understand. And so I need that for myself. I need something a little bit more tangible that I can, visualize and understand. So my thing that I kind of use now is, you hear people talk about the God within and how, people can speak to, our higher power can speak to us through other people. And so I thought, okay, if we have a God within, I just visualize that I've got this pure inner core that we all have, not just me. I'm not putting myself above anyone, and I'm not saying I'm a God, so please don't misinterpret those words. But I'm saying I visualize us all as having this pure inner core. And life happens, and stuff gets piled on, and stuff gets piled on. And we do our stuff in our addiction, our character defects, all the stuff gets piled on. And I think that my job in recovery, my turning it over to a higher power, is to dig through all that mess, to dig through it, to get rid of all that mess, and to try and get to that point where that pure light can shine out, where I can act on spiritual principles, even if they're not the easy thing to do. I can act on spiritual principles, even if it's not what's most convenient for me, even if it's not what's going to make me look the best. It's not about trying to impress anybody anymore. It's not about trying to look good on the outside. It's about really, I just have this desire to just do the right thing, just because it's the right thing to do, and just be like a decent person. And one of the gifts I've gotten in recovery is that I'm getting to be that kind of person. I was relating so much to what Blake was saying earlier, because it's like my same kind of thinking is like, I don't have to hide from people anymore. I don't have to worry about who's in a room together anymore. I don't have to worry about who do I need to avoid, who do I owe money to, what lie did I tell this person. I don't need to be ashamed of how I'm living my life today. I've got these spiritual principles that I can apply, and when I do that, I can live the kind of life that I don't wake up hating myself anymore. I can't remember the last time I woke up and said, you fucked up again. I don't live that kind of life today anymore, and it's because of these principles in this program. And it's because I think when we apply these steps and we work this program, it gets us to be the person that we're meant to be. Addiction took that away. We grew up being happy, joyous, free little children, most of us, and then addiction came in and swooped us away. Addiction is not who we are. And when I'm working the steps of this program, I can get to be that person that I'm meant to be. So, that's kind of my goal, is just trying to be a decent person today that doesn't have to apologize. And, I'm certainly far from perfect, and I know that. I'm pretty self-aware as far as my character defects, and I know that for me sometimes I can use powerlessness as an easy way to not try something. Oh, I'm powerless, can't do it. Instead of thinking about the serenity prayer that says, you look, can I change this or can I not change this? But sometimes it's just easier to say, no, I don't think I can. I'm giving up. And when I do that, usually it's because it's those hard things, where the right thing is not always the easy thing. Making those hard decisions, speaking up. There's just some stuff going on right now in our area. I'm sure other areas have been through it, and it's like, I just got to speak up, and I know I'm going to step on a little bit of toes, I think, and I think I'm going to maybe hurt some feelings, but it's like, that can't be what makes the decision. I can't use that as the motivator for what's right. If I'm doing the right thing for the right reason, I'm placing principles before personalities, including the personalities of the people I like. A lot of times when I think of principles before personalities, I think of the personalities that I don't like and remind myself I need to apply spiritual principles. But it also means those people that I do like, that I think are maybe not doing the right thing, I have to have the guts to stand up and say something. And that's not always so easy when it's somebody that I care about and somebody that I like. So, but recovery has taught me that if I don't do those things, if I don't follow my conscience, then it's going to eat away at me. I'm going to have that little voice saying, Lisa, speak up. Be fearless. Quit being such a sissy. My whole life I've kind of just wanted to fade into the background and not be noticed. And it's not been comfortable for me to get out of my comfort zone and do things where I'm not just faded into the background, but I feel better about myself when I can do the right thing. And generally, things are never as bad as what I can make them in my head. I can build things up to be this really big deal, and then I go through and do it, and it's like, oh, all right, that was not so bad. People are understanding, we all have our path that we're on, and, we just do the best we can do. So my time is up. Thank you. Enjoyed sharing.
Thank you, Lisa. And that brings up Gabe B.
Thanks, Lisa. Addict called Gabe. Hey, family. So when I think about the first 3 steps, I think, really about how they applied when I was new, and then how I can continue to apply them in recovery. So I think what I'm going to do is talk about what that looked like when I first got clean, and then talk about what the first 3 steps looked like in the most recent crisis that led me to formally work those steps again, which is a few years ago now, but it's all I've got. I could sit here and talk about how the first 3 steps apply to like eating donuts or some shit, but like that's kind of boring, So yeah, how long do I have? 25. Thank you. So step 1. Sorry. We talk about the powerlessness. We admitted we were powerless. And so when I think about it, it's like that's one of those real obvious pieces, for me. There was never really any question. I learned pretty early on, what that powerlessness looked like, and it was everything. A lot of the stuff Lisa talked about, everything we talk about in meetings. Trying to substitute drugs, trying to control using. Just the real simple stuff, like the first time when I was 17 years old and the first time I got arrested and I was on probation. And it's like, looking back, it's so simple. The simplest thing to do would be, I'm going to have to take a urine test, so I'm just going to not use during that period, right? Like somebody who's not an addict, that's the way they would do it. And for me, that was too simple. So I had to say, well, I've got to keep using. So I'm going to have to come up with some weird contraption and tape something up under my nuts or whatever and make myself uncomfortable and go out of my way and do all these things because not using wasn't an option, right? And so the simple answer was never, as I continued to get in trouble from using, again, stopping would have been the simplest thing. Just don't do it. And that never crossed my mind, until, for me, the bitter ends involved getting locked up in prison at 20 years old. And then looking back and saying, wow, what just happened? It was obvious that it was from using. And so it's like, the fact that I couldn't stop using drugs until I got locked up told me everything I needed to know about powerlessness, right? Unmanageability, the same thing. My life was never manageable. As soon as I started using, the very first time I had any kind of drug of my own, after the first couple, using it with friends, out at parties or whatever, anything amount, it wasn't like I sat there and held on to it till there was a weekend or something, a party or a high school dance or something. It was, I'm going to use this before school the very next day, because I didn't like myself, I didn't like the way I felt about myself, and I needed that to change as soon as I could, And so from there, the unmanageability, my life just unraveled. Being able to maintain in school, being able to maintain at work with my family, all these things. Being able to hold on to anything of any value without selling it. It's just, Lisa talked about our morals eroding and the values I had, doing stuff that I said I would never do, all these things were just these very obvious symbols of unmanageability. So, more recently, that's dangerous. More recently, the crisis that I had that led to me, formally working these steps again, was, a few years ago, I had about 8 years clean. I'd gone through the whole thing where we get clean, we get these awesome lives back, and then recovery stops being a priority, right? And it's something that I hear a lot around the room, so I know I'm not alone. And so I stopped working much of a program. I was doing the bare minimum, attending my home group once a week, and really that was about it. And I had never taken the time to get to know myself. I'd never taken the time to get to know who I was, to have value in that relationship with myself. So, I'm in this relationship, I wasn't happy, and I had, the fear I had was being by myself. Really, and that wasn't a conscious thing at the time. That's looking back and being able to, to do the autopsy now, and say, that's what it was. I was afraid to be by myself. So the way I got out of it was, and I was engaged, I left the woman for an employee of mine who was 19, and I was like, 32 or whatever. And so it's like that, that was this insanity of, my life was unmanageable at that point. So what happened at that point was promptly, that relationship ended within a few months, and that wasn't my choice. And at that point I was sick because it was like, what have I done? I made these decisions. My life is in shambles. I had it was just a shit show. I was about to leave the state. I was going to move to Maine to be with this woman when she broke it off with me or whatever. And I'd quit my job. I'd given notice at my apartment. All this stuff. And so that was it. I mean, I was powerless, because I was sick. I mean, I was in that kind of pain where I didn't want to use, but I didn't know what else to do either. And I just remember being up at night and getting in the car and driving, and relapsing on smoking, and all that shit, And so where the second step came into play is that, I came to believe, I already knew that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity because I'd been through it. I'd been through those, I had the survival instincts of going back to the basics, and that's what that meant for me. For me, a power greater than myself restoring me to sanity meant, okay, now I need to come back home. I need to start going to meetings every day. I need to get in touch with my sponsor. I need to get back into the steps. I need to reach out to all my guys, all my brothers in the fellowship, and talk about the pain I was in. And luckily, since I did that at the beginning, that was an instinct. I didn't have to think much about that, And so that was the second step in that situation was just, I'm in pain and I know there's something that can help me, And when we talk about a higher power, I could relate a lot to what Lisa was saying, my need to define my higher power has lessened the longer I've been clean. I haven't felt the need to put a pin on that. The longer I'm clean, the more vague the concept gets, and that seems counterintuitive, but that's what's worked for me. I could really relate to the part where she was talking about that inner core, and for me, my higher power is, God lives inside me, and God lives inside you guys. And so where I communicate with my higher power is the connection I have with you guys, And when I have these relationships in recovery, and my higher power lives in that connection. So when I reach out and get honest with somebody in the program and tell them, hey, I'm in pain, and they say, yeah, I've been there. I don't know what to do to fix it, but I'm here for you. That's where my higher power lives, right there, I just thought I'm kind of all over the place, but going back to the first step, when we talk about we get clean, and then we our addiction takes on these other forms, right? These other manifestations, and that's what I was talking about with that situation in my life. And it works out why it says we may once again try to fill the awful emptiness we sometimes feel with something outside ourselves. And that's all it is, it's when I worked the first step for that second, or, again, when I had a situation, what I ended up with at the end of that, and it asks in the step working guide, what does the first step mean to you? Basically, what that boiled down to for me was about the void, the spiritual void. And the only thing that can really fill it is my higher power, my relationship with my higher power, and my relationship with myself, And if I don't have those three things, I'm going to always be going outside of myself, Whether that takes a form of a relationship, a person, whether that takes a form of a donut, or, spending my money irresponsibly, always needing some kind of stimulus because I can't sit still and be by myself. That's all that void. And that's really, for me, that's the essence of the disease, is the spiritual void and the obsession and compulsion that results from trying to fill it with something outside myself. And the crazy thing about the first step, I always remember in a basic text it talks about step one means we do not have to use, and that is a great freedom, right? And it's just one of those paradoxes. It's like, what do you mean it means we do not have to use? And it expands and it works on why it says the minute we admit we're powerless, we never have to use again. And so it's like, it's crazy. All I have to do is admit it, and now I don't have to use. And it's like, man, the thing I always talk about in meetings is the cliches. right? And so we all latch onto those different cliches like Lisa was talking about. And so for me, today we have a choice, right? That's one of my favorites. And so it's like when I was using, I never had a choice. From the minute I picked up the first one, I didn't have a choice to get to the next one. I had to. Because the guilt and shame I experienced as a result of the shit I did while I was using meant I needed to get another one. And so I didn't have a choice. Now, once that was taken away from me, and for me, I don't know if I would have ever got clean just off the streets. I'm amazed that you guys do that. I mean, my hat really goes off to you. I needed to get locked up and get pulled away from that shit forcibly. And so when it was taken away from me, it was like, oh, today we have a choice. Now I have a choice. And so every day I wake up and make that choice is sacred to me, because I know the minute I pick up another one, the choice is gone. I'm not going to have it anymore. It's a wrap. I don't know if I'll be able to make it back, and again, I take your guys' word for it. When somebody goes out and they tell, I don't need to try it out for myself. Because I know I have that faith that the minute we admit we're powerless, we're powerless. We never have to use again. I know I never have to use again. That's done. So the basic text in this in the second step, it talks about a need for faith and sanity. And I think that's really powerful to me, right? Because I was insane. Again, that wasn't ever real hard to sell me on. I can look back at all the shit I did, all the crazy shit I did, and know I was insane. Nobody needed to talk me into that. I could see the evidence for it in my life. In the same thing, in more recent when I had that crisis, and I the insanity was apparent to me. Doing the shit I did, making the decisions I made. I remember right there, Merck the 30, right there, convention, right fucking there in Ann Arbor. I was out of my fucking mind, and I left. I left the convention because at that point I knew I was moving. I knew I was moving to Grand Rapids. I got clean in Ann Arbor. I was there for 8 years, and then I moved to Grand Rapids. And I moved there as a result of that event happening in my life. And I was a week away from moving. And the convention, for the first time of me being clean, was in my hometown. And this woman who I already knew the relationship was over, was back in town. And I was out of my mind, and I left the convention to be with her. Because that was my drug at the time. And my self-esteem was that low. Even knowing that this was my solution, I could be here in my solution, but I was out of my mind. I couldn't be still. So I left. So it's like, again, in retrospect, that insanity is like crystal clear to me. The we is one of the reasons our program is special to me is like we have that we in our steps, right? And so it talks about we came to believe. And it's like, what does that really mean? We came to believe. It means, as I sat in here in meetings with y'all, talking about this is what it was like, this is what happened, and this is what it's like now. I see the restoration to sanity in y'all. And so I start to believe it could work for me. That's the we. And the restoration is always an interesting thing to me. We talk over and over again. It's just like, what did I have to recover? I had to recover this 13-year-old boy before I started using, who was innocent. I didn't have a life to recover. I didn't know how to live. But that's that innocence and that purity. That's what there was to be restored with me. And so I came to believe that a power greater than myself, again, which is not necessarily you guys, but which you guys are a part of, could restore me to sanity. That meant that I saw you guys go through it. I knew it was possible for me. I knew it was possible to return to return to that state before I started doing all this shit that I, had all this guilt and shame over, and then build a life from there. And where I went wrong the first time is I short-circuited some of that by, I went a little too fast. And a lot of us do that, So I started building this life before I really knew what to do with it, And the deepest thing, man, in step 2, in the basic text of the last paragraph, the thing that always blows my mind, it says, the process of coming to believe restores us to sanity. And it's like, when you really sit there and think about that, what does that mean? The process of coming to believe. That doesn't even mean that God restores me to sanity. It's just the process of coming to believe. That whole thing, I just went through that whole journey of, what it takes to really come to believe that it's possible. And then I'm restored. And not that it's not a continuous process, not that it's not ongoing, and that this isn't a daily thing, but through the process, I become restored. So what that tells me is it's not a destination. There's not a graduation. There's no summit, right? It's just a constant thing, and I'm constantly being restored. So step 3 for me. With that situation, it was like, okay, I had a fork in the road, and I remember sitting down with my sponsor and talking to him about this decision, where I knew I was moving, right? I gave up my apartment, I gave up my job, I needed a change, and I was either going to move to Grand Rapids or I was going to move to fucking Maine, right? And that would have been a great adventure for some people, but for me, I was going to move there. I had a job there. That was one thing I had, was a job, But I was going to move there, and really, to be honest, I was probably going to move there chasing this relationship that I already knew was over, And I looked, on the website in Maine, and the whole state is an area. It's not even a region. Their whole state is an area with a fucking meeting list. It's not even trifold. It's just that's it for the whole state. I'm like, man, and at this point, I'd already gone back to the basics. I was going to a meeting a day. And I'm like, that's not going to cut it for me. I'm gonna be driving an hour and a half some nights to get to a meeting, and I'm not going to be doing that, so I'm not going to be going to a meeting. And so the easier, softer way presented itself, which was I had friends in Grand Rapids. I knew there was strong recovery there. I knew people out there. I had a couple jobs. A couple jobs waiting for me. It was like. We turned our will, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of a power greater than ourselves. So I made the decision that, I could fight it and try to make this thing work that wasn't working, or I could just take the easier, softer way, And that's what happened in my life. It's just gotten so crazy good since then, It's just nuts, the blessings I've gotten, the miracles that have happened in my life are just like, it's really cool because you always hear people talk about we got to live 2 lives in one lifetime. It's like, I've lived a fucking lot more than that, because I feel there's times just in recovery where it feels like that was a lifetime ago, so that was it. I was able to listen to my higher power instead of doing what I wanted to do, and it paid off. So like that's the third step, It works how and why it talks about, this is crazy, man. It says this decision in the relationships that result from it and grow from it will revolutionize our existence. I mean, that's like sometimes, sometimes our literature takes some pretty strong stances and some pretty strong language, and that's some of the strongest language, the third step will revolutionize our existence. It's like they're not pulling any punches, They're not using subtlety there, And so it's like, wow, that's possible for me. So we turn it over, and so for me, when I got clean, what that meant was, I did the whole thing where I got out of prison, I came to NA, and I didn't have to use. And like you guys, it was my safe space. That's where I went every night. But I didn't know if I really wanted to hang out with y'all. You know what I mean? Like the meeting, like that was good enough. You know, the meetings, and maybe I'd smoke a cigarette with you guys after the meeting. But then I would go, and I was living with some friends who still used, and they were partying and drinking and shit. And that made it real easy for me to like have one foot in my new life and one foot in my old life, you know. And I didn't tell anybody about it because I was ashamed. And about 90 days in, I finally told the truth about that after a meeting. And no, I told it during a meeting. And then the guys after the meeting came up to me and they surrounded me with love, and they started asking me then, hey, how's that going for you? How's that working out for you? And slowly but surely, after telling the truth, you know, around that time also somebody, you know, I started hanging out with you guys after the meetings and stuff. And it was like, for me, that was the third step into action, because again, my higher power talked to me through you guys. Hey, you know, that's probably not a good idea, right? Like, aren't you on parole? Like, that's probably not a good idea. And so after that lease was up, I moved in with somebody in recovery, and my life got easier, you know, because I listened for my higher power's will, and then I acted on it. I turned it over. You know, it says, and it works out why our higher power will care for our spiritual needs, but we need to participate in our own lives. We can't simply sit back and expect God to do everything. We are responsible for our recovery. So for me, that's a lot to do with the third step. You know, I mean, I say the prayer every morning. You know, when I say my prayers, and you know, sometimes I'm present for them, and sometimes I'm not, and I say them either way. And you know, so I turn it over every morning, and whether or not, at that point, whether or not I live in that is up to me. You know, it's up to me if I really want to turn it over with my actions, or if I'm gonna take my will back. You know, at this point in my recovery, again, it's pretty apparent whether, you know, I'm acting on my will or God's. I mean, it's you know, now there is that Just for Today reading where it talks about our will and God slowly they merge, right, and they start to align, and I've seen that happen, and that's really true, and it's less of a fight every day, you know. But it's still, it's my responsibility, you know. I can ask God, I can make that decision to turn it over, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to act on it. And what, you know, whether that means, you know, feeling sorry for myself that, you know, I've got a record and so I can't get a job, and so I'm just not going to do anything, or whether that means, okay, I'm going to take matters in my own hands and make something happen, you know. That's still God's will for me, you know. As long as I'm asking along the way, you know. As long as I'm not just taking the bull by the horns. So there's a lot of gray areas in there. You know, it's not always black and white. Yeah, I mean it's crazy. Looking at that again, that kind of blew my mind when I looked back and saw that was the banner from the convention I was talking about, you know, because, you know, last night I got to introduce my fiance, and I was talking about the next convention, which was there when we were first together, and it's like just in a matter of a year, my life had changed drastically, and now 3 years later, it's changed even more drastically, and it's like we have the potential here for us. I mean, the theme of Beyond Our Wildest Dreams, you know, I mean, that potential's there, and it's just crazy how it's really unlimited. There's no ceiling, and so I'm just so grateful for that. Grateful for the opportunity to share with you guys. That's all I got.